The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to editors and journalists and writers and sometimes filmmakers, videographers, really anybody who puts something out in the borough of the Bronx. And for our second segment, we're going to be talking with a gentleman who has put out some unbelievable reports about their accomplishments in Bronx health and Bronx nutrition and working with young people. But before that, we're going to get started and bring back a longtime friend of ours, Samar Khurshid from Gotham Gazette. Nice to have you with us once again, Samar. How are you?
Thanks, Gary. I'm doing well. Hope you're well too.
I didn't realize that you mentioned before the show that it had been all the way to before the pandemic that we had been together. That's way too long. So we're going to have you back. Anyway, I was particularly interested, as I mentioned to you, in this piece you wrote. It's actually maybe even about a month ago about the Bronx becoming a focal point in the mayoral race. You may or may not know, we did a forum here on BronxNet with 8 of the mayoral candidates. Went very, very well. Many seem to really understand and know what the borough of the Bronx is. Talk to me about why you singled out our home borough in the mayor's race.
Well, you know, it's funny that people like to say that Staten Island's the forgotten borough, but it seems that Bronxites quite feel the same thing, you know, that because it is the 4th largest borough. It also comes in 4th in, so it's 4th in population, 4th in number of registered Democrats, number of total registered voters. Also, it's also 4th in turnout. So what happens is because it's 4th in turnout, Democratic candidates for mayor especially tend not to, you know, focus on it because they think that's not where they're going to get the votes to win a primary. Especially in a primary, focus on the vote-rich areas, places like Central Brooklyn, the Upper East Side, Upper West Side, you know, places where they think, because they just need a couple of 100,000 votes to win. They don't need all 8 million, you know.
That's right.
So what happens is the Bronx tends to get ignored. Every 4 years, candidates might come by, make some broad promises, and then, you know, return the next time they're up for re-election or, you know.
Right. So what was the change that pushed it forward for this year that all of a sudden they were like, oh yeah, we love the Bronx?
Well, this year, every candidate has been proposing and should be proposing a plan for rebuilding the city, for the city's recovery. And if you're going to talk about the city's recovery, you can't ignore what is one of the hardest hit boroughs. Like the Bronx has had some of the worst public health outcomes, some of the highest rates of COVID infections, and you know these are long-standing problems that have been exacerbated by the pandemic. So if candidates are going to be talking about recovery for the city, they can't just, you know, a plan for Manhattan doesn't work for the Bronx. The plan for Staten Island doesn't work for the Bronx. So they need to have borough-specific plans, is what people are looking at them for. You know, voters in the Bronx especially want to hear from them how they're gonna show up, and not just before election day, but after.
I think anybody who's serious about trying to understand what has gone on over the past year has got to obviously take a look at the Bronx. I will tell you, as somebody who's been sitting in this seat for a while, this is an ongoing issue for the people of the Bronx. And I have told this story many times. Somewhere in the late 90s, Freddie Ferrer ran a press conference under the L at Yankee Stadium, had a big sign that said, "Don't dump on the Bronx." Since that time, and not to say it never happened before, but people of the Bronx have said, you know what, we're not getting it from anywhere else. We're going to do it ourselves. And so, I mean, we have hundreds of not-for-profit organizations. And so your analysis, I believe, is pretty accurate that they have ignored us. To his credit, Chairman Jamal Bailey of the Bronx Democratic County Committee has said, wait a minute, if you want Bronx votes, we gotta see who you are. And frankly, they came to us and said, why don't you run a debate? And they talked about the Bronx. Long way of saying, my sense is when I interviewed and did that program, that the candidates, I don't want to miss anybody, Eric Adams, Diane Morales, Maya Wiley, Scott Stringer, Sean Donovan and Catherine Garcia were all on the program we did. They seemed to really have a real sense of what the Bronx was.
You know, Ruben Diaz Jr. was at one point considered a possible top contender for the mayor's race. Now, if he was running, he would have the Bronx locked up. He's extremely popular, extremely affable. You know, people recognize him on the street. They wave at him, you know, shout from cars to him. And I've seen that in person. Now, with him, when he decided he's not going to run, when he decided he's going to retire after his term ends, that leaves the Bronx entirely open to any other candidate. There's no other major candidate in this race who's from the Bronx. There's no Bronx candidate per se, you know. So that basically means it's an open field. It's like, you know, anyone, it's up for grabs.
It's almost like because he decided not to run, there was a void in the borough of the Bronx. But, you know, I mean, I guess I can appreciate that you said we have the, you know, fourth largest population, but there's still a 1.4 million people here. And if people were to get behind one candidate, that would pretty well, you know, swing the thing. Let's talk a little bit while we have a little time about budgets. I don't think people understand it. And right now, there's no money. You know, of course, we'll see if the stimulus package helps to provide some relief. So let's talk about the de Blasio's preliminary budget, which was about $92.3 billion, and then the city council's reaction to it.
So the mayor presented a worst case scenario budget. The $92.3 billion that he presented, that doesn't account for any federal aid. They budgeted as if they weren't receiving any federal aid. So it's not as bad as it was. And
let me just interject, because we think there could be money in the stimulus package that will help.
There's $6 billion specifically for New York City in the stimulus package. So that solves a lot of the city's problems. But what it doesn't do, this is a one-time injection of funds. So what it doesn't do is solve the structural problems in the city budget, because once this money is gone, the same issue is going to show up. So the same problems that they have now will, you know, reappear after federal funding disappears. So the problem is, you know, he's using a $1.15 billion from the reserves. He said he's going to find $1 billion in labor savings, but he hasn't said how. And he's, you know, spending is still going up. There's a lot of, as the comptroller has pointed out, there's a lot of areas where the city spends but doesn't get many results for it. So these are structural issues that they'll have to sort out by creating more savings, finding more efficiency, if they want to make sure that these budget gaps just don't persist in the future. Because one of the biggest issues now is that property taxes, which is a large part of city revenue, and it's usually considered very stable. Property taxes are going to fall by about $2.5 billion because
I'm sure.
Because office buildings and hotels, their values have just plummeted because they've been empty since the pandemic hit. So that's going to be the biggest issue for the city to confront next year.
And you did, I do want to mention, people can look it up very easily on Gotham Gazette. You wrote a piece on how the mayoral candidates said that they were going to, you know, try and address this. But there's no question that with all those empty office buildings in Manhattan, something's got to give, you know, and I'm not the guy, I'm not the financial guy to figure out how to do it. The other thing that is striking to me, and I frankly haven't ridden the subway since the pandemic, but people I know who have said conditions with homeless people and people with mental issues are roaming through the subway, and it's a very serious situation. That is also a financial thing, because in order to solve it, you have somehow got to deal with social service support infrastructure, certainly job development, and also, of course, housing, which is really, that's what makes a homeless person homeless. Any thoughts on that? Does that fall to the next mayor? Is it a financial problem? How do you see that being addressed?
It absolutely falls to the next mayor. It's both a financial problem. It's also a values problem, because between Governor Cuomo and Mayor De Blasio, their first instinct has always been to throw cops at the issue. And as we're seeing in this race for mayor, most of the candidates are proposing solutions that increase mental health services support, social supports, investing in affordable housing, supportive housing. These are the types of things that will, help keep people off the streets, help keep people in stable housing, instead of, criminalizing them or, jailing homeless people for the crime of being homeless.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I smiled when you said that, because no candidate for council or citywide office is going to sit there and say, no, I'm not going to put in money for mental health social service support. But of course, somehow we get to the bottom line and that ends up being what's cut. I have a feeling the sensibility right now in the nation and in the city is, you know what, especially with everything going on, we really do have to spend this time on it. Right. That's my thought.
And let's not forget the stimulus package includes nearly $100 billion in money that's going to come either directly or indirectly to New Yorkers, to New York State. That includes, there's money for transit, there's money for mass transit, so the MTA is going to get some. There's money, there's unemployment insurance, there's direct, the stimulus checks, of course, $1,400 each. The $12.5 billion that the state will get in direct financial relief. The city will get $6 billion. City and in towns, municipalities, everyone will get some. So a lot of that money is also going to go towards, investing in all these programs that the city and state desperately need to do right now.
Samar, we're just about out of time. What do you got coming up? Anything you want to tip us off to?
Well, funny thing, I have a story on the budget coming up today.
There you go. Well, we're recording this Monday, so by Thursday when it airs, people will be able to read that story.
Yeah, I have a story on the budget, and then continuing our coverage of the mayoral candidates. We've been doing a series on strengths and weaknesses for each candidate. So
but we do got to run. Make sure you check out, if you haven't already, the Bronx mayoral forum that we did, which provided some interest in the borough of the Bronx, which is the first topic we talked about. Anyway, don't be a stranger. We want to have you back. You're just one of the real important journalists in New York City. Samar Khurshid from Gotham Gazette, thank you so much. We're going to take a short break. We're going to put on a different kind of hat and do something a lot different, but it's going to be inspiring. I can promise you that. So don't go away. We'll be back with the Bronx Buzz right after this.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community, and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from Bronx, this is Trans.
Welcome back to the Bronx Buzz. And I am just thrilled because he's a friend of mine. He's a friend of the Bronx. He's a friend of the Bronx children, especially. And that is my good buddy, Stephen Ritz. The Green Bronx Machine is here.
Why, thank you, Gary. It's so good to see you. Love that tie.
I know. And
Spring is blooming, baby, right on your shirt.
That's it. Spring is busting out all over or something. Stephen Ritz, you put out a report of all the things that you and the Green Bronx Machine has done in, I guess, last year in 2020, which was a very difficult year. But you and your colleagues at the Green Bronx Machine have stepped up. The numbers are just unbelievable. 5,000 pounds of produce grown locally in the Bronx. Just talk to me about what this year was like for GBM.
Well, this was the year that blew the roof off of everything. Let's start 2020, and thank you for acknowledging the work of this organization. But I think this was the year that changed everything. We learned just how broken things are. Food systems, the education system, the legal system, you know, all the social unrest that we've seen. So this was a year that really requires us to take stock of who we are as individuals and as a nation. And, you know, I'm proud to be wearing, of course, my education, not asphyxiation t-shirt, because that's what this movement is all about, sequestering carbon and putting more oxygen into our beautiful Bronx borough and around the world. But this was a year, and I want to take a moment to thank all of our local friends, family, and supporters, people who came out to help us plant and grow that 5,000 pounds of food. I want to take a moment to say thank you to local vendors, the merchants, the incredible people at Hunts Point who helped us rescue 10,000 pounds of food from landfill and deliver it to hungry families across the borough. And thanks to everyone who bought a t-shirt, bought a book, got involved and made a donation, because we delivered door to door across this borough and to some seniors in Washington Heights over 100,000 pounds of food, door to door in the height of COVID. So for us, it was all about impact. We are an impact-driven, for-purpose organization dedicated to growing something greater.
And one of the things that we have talked about on not only this show, but my other program, Bronx Talk, is that despite the difficulties, there have been some real revelations. And you've articulated the fact that now we realize more than ever that, number one, kids have to have opportunities in schools to understand things better, because it's a big, sometimes dangerous, complicated world. And more importantly, the emphasis on nutrition and health. And we can do these things. All we need, I believe, all we need is the will. Now, you have something that you were going to announce, funding and some other things that are coming to us. Let's talk about it.
I mean, there's so much to announce, but you know, you've hit the key piece here in the Bronx and around the world. The most important school supply in the world is food. Children will never be well-read if they're not well-fed. And this is a community and across America where food justice is racial justice. So who has access to what, where, when, and how determines everything, because food really impacts our social determinants of health. In that spirit, I'm just super excited that Green Bronx Machine is working with the New York City Department of Education and the Department of Sustainability grants to help bring 50 new gardens to schools across New York City. And we're going to do indoor gardens, we're going to do outdoor gardens, and unlike many other vendors in New York City, what we're doing is we are just being the conduit, the direct connection between the source of this technology and the great city of New York. So there is zero profit involved on our end. And for a long time, I've been campaigning about the for-profit, nonprofit cycle, where organizations are getting rich off the dysfunction and generosity of New York City and corporate benefactors. And in fact, now, by taking this chunk of money, which traditionally under normal circumstances would have maybe touched 10 to 15 or 20 schools max, we're touching 50 schools. And the manufacturers and suppliers are taking those proceeds and donating them back to hire Bronx students and Bronx adults to be technicians in the trade. So it's going to literally be a circular economy of pipeline to employment.
What I'm going to do and what we're going to do right now, you have incredible materials. I mean, you've developed this stuff. It's just it explains it perfectly. You have a video. We're going to show about a minute of a much longer video to give people an idea of, number one, how serious the food issue is in the Bronx and in the city of New York. And then, of course, a nice picture at the end of it of what the solutions are. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen, I almost said it wrong, the Green Bronx Machine.
Out of darkness came the most incredible light, and the legacy of my son and countless other students that I've had to bury far too young, which will far exceed their time on this earth. We are the poorest congressional district in America. That's an economic reality. You have 45,000 people living within 8 square blocks of each other, and healthy, fresh food is not available. For so many, food is the problem. But for all of us, food is the answer.
All right, there you have it. Green Bronx Machine. It's much like the old rock band Cream. It's not the Cream, it's Green Bronx Machine. Stephen Ritz, you have something really fun. You've partnered with professional athletes before, but now you have partnered with a professional mascot. Talk to me about what's going on with Mr. and Mrs. Met.
Okay, well, not only is it Mr. and Mrs. Met, it's so many great organizations and institutions across New York City, including the amazing American Museum of Natural History, where I go and interview dinosaurs and swim with the great blue whale. And what this really is, it's part of a great new series debuting on PBS called Let's Learn. And our first Green Bronx Machine episode debuts on April 6th. And we have a whole series where the whole thing is designed to connect with children ages 3 years old to 8 who are still at home, still COVID afflicted and affected, and aren't coming to school and may not have access to the internet. So what we are doing is we are pumping live learning lessons and pre-recorded learning lessons through public television designed to teach kids about eating, animals, community, health, wellness, mindfulness, education. And the episode that you're referencing is, yes, in this very classroom, I was visited by Mr. and Mrs. Met, Mr. Met and Mrs. Met. They have autographed cards for you here, Gary. We know you're a fan. Along with your St. Patrick's Day green Mets hat. I wouldn't make sure it's green. You know me, and it has your name on it. And we're debuting episodes on public television that are really designed to engage, enthrall, and most importantly, educate our children.
Now, I'm going to give a little inside baseball, if you will. Steve sent me a clip so I could look at what the video looks like. I was impressed because it looks to me like you are establishing yourself in this video as like a personnel, like a child's television personality. We saw you drawing and you did all these things. Something that we can look toward in the future?
Very funny you mention it. You know, all of our episodes are Bronx-based and Bronx-tested. So they feature Bronx children. It all starts with a call in my classroom, and then we go somewhere because we want children in the Bronx to understand that they're part of a bigger narrative and greater city. But, you know, we teach children to draw. So you talk about the dancing episode. Dancing is not my forte, but you saw part of it. You know, Mr. Met got me rhythmic. And we were literally beta testing these episodes with children in school who love them. My episode got this today. A young child came and gave me riding the blue whale in the middle of the Museum of Natural History with my cheese hat. So we try and make it educational. We try and make it engaging. And we really want children in this moment to know that they're important to me. So it's kind of like a Mr. Cotter meets Mr. Rogers meets Captain Kangaroo on the Grand Concourse. And then, you know, I get on the D train or the 4 train and go somewhere real exciting and bring children with me.
The numbers that you put out are extraordinary. Delivered more than 100,000 pounds of food, rescued more than 10,000 pounds of food, helped feed 2,300 people daily. We talked about growing 5,000 pounds of local Bronx food, brought students on socially distant field trips. And I'm telling you, if you look at your website, it is completely professional. You work with talented people. You do it all yourself. Talk to me about
this is all Bronx based, baby. This is all Bronx based, just like you. All good from the hood. We mean what we say, and we say what we mean. Don't talk to me if you don't have a 104 in your zip code. So in this episode, that we're doing at PBS, it's all Bronx children. It's all Bronx people. We, for far too long, people say we're under-resourced. I take great umbrage with that. The greatest resources are right around us. Look, I was so grateful to meet you when I lived across the street. That's how we met. So I like to say the Bronx is over-extracted. We pay too high a price for too many things, including human capital. So we've got to start building our own infrastructure, telling our own narrative, creating our own stories, growing our own food, creating our own jobs, growing our own teachers, and that's where we're going to make a difference.
You work with a lot of children. The children love this, right? It brings them into school. It attracts them to school. It transforms their lives. Let's get you to just talk about the social media handles. How do people interact? Parents, teachers, kids. How do they help support the resources and take advantage of the resources of Green Bronx Machine?
Well, very kind and gracious of you, Gary. So first and foremost, you can follow us on social media at Green Bronx Machine. On Facebook, I believe it's Green BX Machine. You can follow me, Stephen Ritz, STEPHEN on social media. You can go to the Green Bronx Machine website. You can go to the Stephen Ritz website. You can join us on LinkedIn. And I'm going to tell you, for any educator out there who's watching the show, today is your special day. It's called the Gary Axelbank discount. Any teacher who reaches out to me, I will send you a set of books for your children, free. I'll log into your class. I'll do a reading. This is a Board of Ed approved book. I'll send you a copy. Up, You've Got a Power of the Plant. That's my award-winning #1 best-selling book. If you buy that book, you are supporting from our website, not from Amazon. Because Amazon actually sells it for less than I can buy it for with my offer discount.
Steve, we're going to have to go. I'm going to just show you that my copy is autographed, which I appreciate. Anyway, Stephen Ritz, you're a friend of the Bronx, a friend of me, a friend of the show, and a friend of our children, which is most important. Thank you for everything you do. And we're going to say goodnight to the people of the Bronx.
Get the t-shirt, Gary. What size do you want? I'll mail you one.
Well, there you go, Steve Ritz. Thank you so much for joining us. You are the absolute best. And that's all for the show. Thank you to Samar Khurshid. And thank you, of course, to Green Bronx Machine. Get involved, support, help, be part of the movement. And guess what? We'll see you next week. Have a good night.